Good morning, everyone. Hi. Good morning. So, welcome to our workshop. My name is Zaya Pellegrini, and I'm a first-year MBA student at Case over in the Weatherhead building, and I'll be serving as the room host today. So, this is the Ask Better, Meet Better, the Art of Strategic Questions workshop. It's an hour and a half, and it ends at 10:30. So, if you're looking for a different workshop, now is your chance to make sure you're in the right room. We're all here to learn how to ask better questions, right? Okay, good. So before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items to share. All of the sessions in the ballrooms and the Student Organizing Center are going to be recorded, and they'll be posted to the website in the next 2 weeks. You can also find it on the HOVA app. And at the end of the summit, or before you leave, don't forget to turn in your name badge. I understand these are rented, and so the lanyards and the wooden pieces are going to be turned back in. And if you do turn it back in, you get entered to win a special prize related to the 2027 summit. So we don't have microphones in here, but we do have this recording device. So if you ask a question, Joy will make sure she repeats it back so it's heard in the recording. And if anyone can't hear anything, just ask and we can repeat it. So with that, let me introduce today's speaker, Joy Jackson. Joy is the Vice President at the Institute for Conservation Leadership. She is a master facilitator and exceptional at bringing together multi-stakeholder groups from all across the country. She's also done a lot of work in Cleveland, and some of you may have even worked with her before. I have personally seen Joy's magical way of asking questions. It's broken down barriers, it's invited collaboration, and it's built trust. So please join me in giving Joy a very warm welcome.
I have to say I've had the privilege of knowing Zaya for, I'll go with 4 years, picking a number out of the air. I don't know how long you were with Cleveland Foundation, yeah. And she was my unofficial co-facilitator for a lot of the work that we did in Cleveland. So she's a star. So if you're looking for interns or folks, like Zaya is your person. So yeah, welcome to Ask Better, Meet Better, the Art of Strategic Questions. I'm Joy Jackson. I'm a facilitator with the Institute for Conservation Leadership. And I design and facilitate a lot of meeting discussions. So I work with individual organizations on their strategic plans. I work with networks and coalitions to help them define their goals and really sometimes just to meet better. I design retreats and then also community and practice gatherings. All of our gatherings are different than training, although I'm here today to train you, because our job is to surface the knowledge in the room and to help people work better together. And so what we have learned, and what you all know, is that good questions can be the difference between effective and ineffective meetings. And so I'm always seeking to find the definition of what's a good question, right? Priya Parker, who some of you might know, if facilitators had a rock star, she would be our rock star, TED Talks, books, all that great stuff, says a question is good for a group when it's interesting for each person to answer, and each person in the room is curious to hear the answer to that question. So it's a high and lofty standard, but I think it's a good North Star orientation for the work that we're going to do together today. So the challenge, as with anything, is how to know when to ask the right question at the right time. And so in this session will endeavor to answer that question for you, but because I am a facilitator and I believe in peer learning, we're going to answer it for one another, and you all are also going to teach me. So that's a kind of a little preview of, I will not be standing here talking to you for 90 minutes. You'll be sitting and talking to one another for a big portion of the time. So I believe in you. You can do it first thing in the morning. So our goals for today are kind of threefold. One is to better understand why good questions are central to collaborative gatherings. In Peter Block's community, he talks about people enter meeting spaces with ambivalence, right? So you all probably came in as kind of consumers, like, convince me of what you're saying, impart your knowledge. But good questions kind of transfer the ownership of meetings from the person standing in front of the room to the people in the room. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to better understand different types of questions, 3 different types of questions specifically, and how you can use them at your next gathering. And then you're going to practice creating questions that go the distance. It's very appropriate we're at a university, because I think universities where most people engage in discussions that are often very awkward, like faculty members stand in front of the room and they say, "Hi, I'm Professor Jackson," in the case of my mother, and they ask a question, and then the whole room's silent, right? Awkward, heavy silence. So how do we avoid that? So we're going to talk about that today. So as I mentioned, how today will work is, for the first portion of the meeting, the gathering, reflex, the first portion of the session, it'll be me doing a lot of talking. But as time goes on, you all will be doing a lot of working and a lot of timing. A lot of working and a little talking. So just wanted to give you a heads up. So we're going to get started. Welcome in to the folks who just got here. Let's step through kind of the 3 tips that I'll be stepping through in more detail to ask better questions. So the 3 tips that we're going to kind of travel through in the next 90 minutes is, they kind of go in the order that a meeting goes. So the first tip is to open well with questions focused on context and connection. Then we're going to talk about leading rich discussions and asking questions that spark stories and deep thinking, not declarations. And then at the end, we're going to talk about how to ask questions that deepen commitment and get people committed to the work that we need to do. Any questions, thoughts, feelings? That's actually a terrible question. So at this time in the morning, so way to play it. Okay, so to craft strong questions, you need to know who's in the room. And so Zaya and I were kind of coordinating in the back, but oftentimes when I'm facilitating meetings, I'm like chit-chatting, a little bit I did it, but chit-chatting with people at the table to know who I'm talking to. But context matters. And so we're going to start this morning with an activity of who is in the room. And so I don't know how many people are early birds, if you want to raise your hands, if you're thriving. Okay, all right. If you're night owls, who's like, oh, it was a struggle. You can save space, I'm a night owl, right? Okay.
My hand's ready to go up.
Right, the struggle. So I'm going to invite everyone to stand up, and I'm going to ask you to organize yourselves by distance traveled to be here today. So if you live in those apartments right over there, stand here. And if you traveled from the furthest point in, I don't know, pick a place, Australia, New Zealand, stand here, and then everyone fills in between. I'm going to invite you to move a little bit.
Where you go, we can't find any brand new. Where you press.
I am.
No, that's fine.
Oh, wait.
Hold on. Can we order up that way?
I think they're like gathered in Ohio and figuring it out. An hour drive.
Because I want everyone to go through. So this is the close. Sorry, yeah? Roughly. Go with the progress application. So it's good. All right, so Bill. Yeah. So do you share your name, your title, and your work career?
My name is Zoe. I'm the residential sales and partnerships manager at Roosevelt Riders Composting. We are composting commitment. And I live in Cleveland Heights and my organization is in the city of Cleveland.
Hi, I'm David November. I'm the sustainability manager at Cuyahoga Community College, so the community college in this county. And I live in Rocky River, which is just a little bit west. Morning, everyone. I'm Tony Ramos. I'm from the Northeast Ohio Public Improvement Council, or NOPEC, and I am the director of our commercial and industrial
Good morning, I'm the volunteer. I'm our resilience project manager, and I live in Queens.
Hello, also there's Nicole, but Alex Kirchner. I'm with Watershed Partnership. So we do a lot of work in Cleveland Heights, Shaker Heights, and Cleveland, which are all southern Cleveland. I came from Cleveland Heights.
I'm Erica Frank. I'm the director of education at the Nature Center at Shakerly. I'm in Cleveland, so don't work close through the Nature Center property. And I came from Lakewood. Selena Stelden, Mayor's Office of Sustainability and Climate Justice. And I was born here in Cleveland, right down the road, but I live in Norfolk. Morning, actress Sam Henry. I work at the actress here, and I also live there.
I'm Barry. I have a small private foundation about an hour south of here. We are building a building and I want it to be least harmful to my grandkids.
I'm Megan Sexton, I'm a sustainability professional currently working in freelance consulting, and I came from Young College.
Hello everyone, I'm Zuri Carter. I'm with Metro Park Toledo, where I serve as the Chief Natural Resource Officer. Toledo is about 2 hours away from here, and Metro Park Toledo is a park district under the Ohio Revised Code 1545. And there I oversee the natural resources division.
Everybody, my name is Grayson Hart. I'm a climate action plan implementation manager with the city of Columbus. 2 hours. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Isabel. I'm an environmental policy and communication student at Ohio State.
Oh, I'm Liz Quigley. I'm a program manager with the Sustainability Institute at Ohio State.
Hi, I'm Nina. I'm an environmental policy student at
I'm Elizabeth Ellman, the Sustainability Programs Coordinator for the City of Bexley, Ohio, which is a suburb of Columbus.
I'm from Cincinnati, but I work in Columbus. So emotionally, I'm in Cincinnati. I work with Grayson and
I'm Meredith. I'm a grad student at the University of Michigan. I work for environment sustainability and also work with the brand sustainability.
I'm Beth Gibbons. I'm the director of the Resiliency Office for Washington County.
I'm Alex Miller. I'm the Sustainability Engagement Coordinator for Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. But that's kind of like in between being in Cincinnati, rural area.
I'm Beatrice Murillo. I work for Washington County as the first of my office.
Eric Aiken, this is a trick question. I came from Courtyard Marriott. But yesterday, I am from Ann Arbor, University of Michigan. I work in the provost office as the project manager for sustainability and climate action. I was trying to get more words.
I'm Danielle Baird. I'm based in Lansing, Michigan. I work with Michigan Municipal League where I manage our local government sustainability program.
I'm Mo, City of Indianapolis.
Hi, I'm Mike Knight. I'm a consultant from Chicago. We're engineers that work through sustainability, design, and construction approach.
Renee, Sustainability Coordinator for the Forest Preserves of Cook County. We're 70,000 acres in Chicago and suburbs of Chicago.
I'm Jessica Haversack. I'm based out of Chicago. I'm a structural engineer. I work at Threadland. I'm also part of building sector sustainability.
Morning, Radio Terry Carroll. I'm up the road in southern Wisconsin near Madison, and work for the Aldo Beautiful Foundation and land ethic managers. We're all kind of
My name is Chris Gutzschroeder. I am General Counsel and Director of the Law Program at Gathering Waters, which is Wisconsin's Alliance for Land Trust. My office is in Madison. I woke up at the courtyard. Yesterday, I woke up in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, between Madison and Milwaukee.
Alex Morales Heil. I am coming from St. Louis. I'm at WashU in our Center for the Environment, and I'm a program manager.
I'm Andrea Slippy. I'm a student intern at the Nebraska State Climate Office in Nebraska.
Neil Ballard, I'm the president of the board for Climate Action Place Lead, which I'm very much trying to get my name 10 hours to take on this mission.
Good morning, I'm Heather Gerdale. I'm joined from the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. I'm not with my British accent, so I don't have one. And I'm a senior policy officer. I'm given this week supporting our British consulate in Chicago.
I'm Denise Gravel. I'm an architect and sustainability specialist at Quinn Evans. I'm coming from Washington, D.C., but I represent our offices.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Grant Birch. Last year, I was standing next to the group over there. I was the former executive director of the Green Lakes Energy Institute here at Case Western on the MCS steering committee. We helped bring this summit here. I'm working on grants, helping out my in-laws, and so that was what I got.
Hi, I'm Jim. I actually go to school in Southern Vermont, close to St. Louis, Missouri. I often think about it, but fine. Hi, I'm my colleague. I'm from Chicago.
Even down in Birmingham.
I also sort of play, I'm Delaney, from Indiana, and I'm the government affairs director in the
So it's always important to know who's in the room and to know the connections between people in the room. So I have a few questions to gauge that. So if you have worked with someone in this room in the past, take a step forward. Wow. For the folks who've worked together, just shout it out. Who have you worked with and what were you all doing? Steakhouse.
Steakhouse.
Okay. Who else?
Denise and I will be presenting at 1:30 on our
about animals.
Grayson, Midwest, and Newark. Okay. Well, so a lot of people step forward.
I work with the sustainability too.
Okay.
I got Grant, Erica, and David because we all work in sustainability and self regard. On my climate summit, I had taught track city, my lecture there. My Grant works with my office on and some
yes. Yes. So you all are fairly known to each other in the room. Take a step back. If this is your first summit, MCC summit, take a step forward. Okay, wonderful. Take a step back. If you are currently involved in a collaborative effort, so that can be a network, coalition, a community practice, take a step forward. Okay. What are some of the collaborative efforts you're part of? Someone who's voice that.
Summit of Sustainability Alliance.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
Illinois and Joshua.
Sustainable States Network.
Clean Economy Coalition.
Say again?
Clean Economy Coalition.
Then we can step back. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay. If you are leading a coalition or a network or a collaborative, okay. Where are you leading?
Washington County Positive.
Okay.
USDA Partner Network.
Okay.
They're all having.
Well, the idea of this series of questions was to show two. One, the importance of going into the room, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. And also the different ways you can get people to answer questions. So often questions are answered like I was asking you all this morning, like who's ready? Who has something to do? So you all just got here, you don't know one another. that feels a little putting yourself out there. So sometimes standing and having people step forward, step back, and spectrum exercise is great. Do it. So I'm going to invite you all back to your seats, and we're going to talk a little bit more about by knowing who's in the room is important. Thank you for starting off that. Well, the first kind of big tip for asking better strategic questions, as I said, is knowing who's in the room. And a lot of the questions that I just asked helped me figure out, does this room need bonding or bridging? So if you read Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam, this might seem a familiar concept to you, but bonding a group helps groups that know one another already. So if your coalition has been together a long time, if you all have worked together, it's been a pretty static group, you want to help people know new things about one another. And bridging, which is often the work, especially in climate work, of bringing together new partners, disparate partners, right? Like in its most creative functions, you see conservation groups work with hunters and work with, dirt bike and ATV riders to preserve some portion of land. And so you want to bridge. You want to ask questions that help people find common ground in a center to help them work together. And so knowing who's in the room helps you figure out, like, which way do I lean in my opening questions, especially. And so some of the work that I did in Cleveland was helping to bring together, some of you might actually have been a part of it, I was trying to hear some names, a new kind of advocacy coalition, conservation coalition. And it included groups that knew one another very well, but didn't always get along very well. And so that group in a way needed bridging, right? They needed to start to build new connections, not bonding, because some of them didn't like each other, but bridging to find a way in to one another. So we asked a lot of questions that were centering of the group. How did it come to be that you worked in conservation? Not what does your group want to do, those types of things. And I actually asked a provocative question because I'm not from Ohio, even though I basically work in Ohio. And I pulled up a lot of newspaper headlines about Ohio and conservation that weren't so flattering. And I said, are these the things that are true of your city of Cleveland? And Clevelanders have great pride, as everyone from Cleveland can attest to. And everyone's like, no. That's called the Campbell principle, right? Like you want to say something that's wrong. And I was like, well, tell me how I'm wrong. And how are you going to work together to convince me and others that that's wrong? And now the group kind of got centered in a way that helped them work together. There were still flare-ups, but it was a good start. So in this room, do we need opening questions that bond or bridge based on what we've learned about who's in the room?
Bond.
Yeah? Bonding? Tell me why. I heard it come from over here, but I don't know who said it.
What I heard from almost everyone in the room is a lot of common energy, common thoughts, common work.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know each other necessarily all that well, but we're all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, great insight.
I also thought Chris and heard it because establishing new common ground amongst people that don't know each other seems fruitful.
Yeah. I think in this instance, you're both right. You're similar enough that you're kind of known to one another. You all didn't hear things that are kind of far flung from the work that you do. But yeah, there's a little bridging because you are strangers virtually to one another. So we're going to think about that because I'm going to ask you to talk at your tables really quickly. But when you think about opening questions, and we're all familiar with icebreakers, right? Like, would you be a fire truck or a rowboat? Or what's your favorite color? But essentially, those are weak opening questions, but they carry the fundamental principles of opening questions, which is you always want to start with questions that focus on recall, right? You want to, because you can answer them quickly, right? So you don't want to ask questions that involve a lot of synthesis, right? Like, why is your organization so interested in cleaning up the, Potomac River? Sorry, I'm from DC. You want to just be like, they can recall, right? You want questions that focus on I, because you can't get your own perspective wrong. So don't ask people to speak on behalf of their organization in opening questions. Ask them to speak on behalf of their own perspective and experience. That's especially helpful in rooms like this where you have people of varying levels of responsibility and experience, right? Oftentimes people with less experience kind of defer to the people with more, and you don't want that if you're offering collaborative gatherings. So I always say people with more experience, you carry the lessons, and people with less experience, you carry fresh eyes. And both experiences are important. So if you ask I questions, everyone is on equal footing. And then great opening questions are specific, but not too specific, so they give everyone a clear entry point to the space. So I'm going to ask you to break the ice with those around you at your tables, get to know each other a little bit deeper. So I've offered like 4 opening questions here. The top one is a real opening question that I asked because I went to something and looked ridiculous, and it was an impulse purchase that I made off of Instagram. So I made a joke about it instead of being like, I'm sorry, but my dress looks funny. So I was like, what's a recent impulse purchase that you regret? I did that dress, and why? Think back to when you decided to attend this summit. What inspired you to attend? What led you to choose this session over others? Or in reflecting on your work so far this year, what are some things you're particularly proud of? So I want you to look at these questions, and maybe instead of answering them at your tables, you can share which question was most appealing to you as an opening question and why. And so we're going to talk through that. I'm going to give you all about, how big are these tables? Oh, some of these tables are a little bit. I'm going to ask you to do it in trios. So we got trios or quads, whatever works. And I'm going to give you about 6 minutes to do that. If you know a lot of people where you're sitting, I'm going to invite you to turn your chairs and talk to people that you don't know. Okay. So 6 minutes starts now. All right. So I'm curious to hear what questions were appealing to folks. Which of these questions stood out as appealing? I see 3. Tell me why.
Black, like, we have some commonality together, the 3rd one.
Yeah.
The 4th one was like, well, I really thought that it's based on the timing of it, it could be a little intense for like a question.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, the first one.
Yeah, it's kind of fun, right? Okay, super helpful. Great insights, especially about the difference between 2 and 3, right? Could be tricky. Okay, who else?
My group hit on all of them, for different reasons. But we spent the most time, none of us individually picked them before, so we spent a lot of time, talking through them before, after going around Robin.
Great. Who else? One more group to share.
You picked the first one.
Right, the fun one.
Yeah.
Yeah, to get to know one another. Low stakes, kind of. You can open up a little, get to know one another. Great. Well, these questions could work for bridging and bonding, and kind of two observations from folks in the room. Some of them are guaranteed to be I statements, I questions, right? Number 1 is a me, right? Number 3, probably a me, although someone could have volunteered you to be here. Number 2 could be like you said, to your point, your job sent you here. So maybe that's less fun. There's less individuality potential in that question. And then number 4 is an individual question. Maybe it's not sexy to read, but it's fun to answer. So you can put these in your back pocket and take them with you and ask 1, 2, or all of them at your next gathering. That's the deep. Okay. So tip number 2 is to ask questions that spark stories and deep thinking and not declarations. So this is a fancy way of saying ask open-ended questions, not closed questions, but that's much easier to say than do. So this is kind of deepening your understanding of that. So how can you spark this type of deeper conversation in your meetings, which you all have already kind of jumped into with great alacrity, so good job. So the first way to ask an open-ended question is to ask a person to tell a story. Many of those opening icebreaker questions kind of invited stories, but stories are a great way to open a question, right? And so compare and contrast these 2 questions. So what's the difference between this political administration and the last for your organization? That's a fair question. That's probably a question you want to know the answer to, but it's a question that's difficult to answer because I should have put the Bloom's taxonomy slide at the beginning. But there's an order of operations of how people learn and how people express themselves. And this is a pretty high order question because you have to think about all of the things that happened, right? You have to think about the impact of those decisions And then you have to synthesize that answer into talking to people. So it's a high demand question, right? You want to go for low demand questions. Stories are low demand because they're just asking you to narrate an experience. Something like this. Tell me when you first knew that this administration would be different as it relates to your work. Now I'm just recalling an experience. I knew it when my funding got cut, right? I knew it when I lost a staffer. This is when it showed up for me. Low demand question other than testing your cognitive abilities, but I trust everyone in here is doing great. So questions that encourage descriptions and storytelling facilitate open-ended answers, which means you can go, tell me more about that, right? Questions that encourage declarations lead to closed responses. What do you think about the mayor's new bill or new whatever? I don't like it. Why don't you like it? It just doesn't work for me. There's no place to go from there. You can't dig into anything from there. Tell me how you learned about this. You know, that's a question that you can open up. Tell me about a time that you changed your mind. What led you to change your mind if you changed your mind? Those are discussion questions. You can kind of swim in those a little bit. So these are great examples of questions that are open in their intention and open in the answers. So you can build on them. A couple of other tips. You can offer scenarios for the group to react to. This is like when I was talking about, I copied and pasted all those horrible headlines about Cleveland's environmental work, which was risky. I'm saying it wasn't risky, and invited groups to react to. You can explore the journey, right? I mean, help me understand how your group went from A to B is a great opening question. Or you can ask a dialectical question. What's a dialectical question, you might ask, here on this university campus, which is home to a lot of them? Well, I'm glad you wondered, because that's where we're going to spend most of the time of this next kind of learning segment. So a person potentially in this room actually inspired this portion of the presentation. I don't see Janita, but if you were at yesterday's opening session, they kind of shouted Janita out in the session. And Janita and I worked together with the bigger coalition for the region, kind of securing federal funding. I facilitated the session. I held the container. The group got the money, so I'm clear. And last year, when the administration changed all of that funding, not all of it, but much of it was cut. But we were waiting and we don't know what to do, right? There's a lot of uncertainty to move forward. So we had a meeting to discuss what to do. And these are the questions that emerged for the grant awards that were given, but the funding itself was frozen, right? We were going to have a meeting with everyone's bosses to have them discuss it. You remember this, Zaya? Yeah, Zaya was in the room. So these are kind of the questions that surfaced about the grants. Like one is just like, what do we do, right? That's the central question. What should we prioritize? Should we proceed as if this is just a delay in funding? What will happen if we don't proceed, right? These are all the questions that are floating around. But we needed a central question to give to like the big players in the region. And Janita, oh my goodness, what just happened? There we go. Janita asked this question that was great. And the question was, how do we balance competing grant required activities while avoiding risky spending that might not be reimbursed? And that is a hell of a question. Kind of like a musician, like I know when things are like a chord and when things are discordant. And when I heard this, it was like, ding. And it's a great question because it asks for the tension, right? If leaders have to talk, you don't want them saying yes or no, which is how they typically show up. You know, I'm going to red stamp that no, I'm going to red stamp that yes, and I'm going to go back to doing the things that are more important than sitting in this room for 60 minutes. So this is a specific type of question, which is a dialectical question. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means right now and how you can do it in your own work. And why they're good for climate work, right? So dialectical questions have energy. So they present two opposing tensions. One that appears to limit the other, but both exist simultaneously. So often they seem paradoxical, but really it's a matter of spectrum. So here are some common tensions in collaborative climate work when you're working in coalitions. Because coalitions are a committee of the willing, right? You're not obliged to be there. You don't have to really do anything. You don't have to stay at the table if you don't want. So you face specific kind of tensions. One is freedom versus structure, right? A lot of the work in collaborative spaces is emergent. It's not prescribed the way it is in an organization. Your boss says to do it, you figure out how to get it done. In collaborations, you come together centered around a central topic and you're like, well, what do we do? Right? So freedom versus structure is a tension that often gets explored. Sharing versus protecting, right? I want to share my proprietary information and what I know, right? That's protecting. Or do I want to share it and make it kind of open source information? Speed versus inclusion, right? There's a problem right now. We have to figure it out. But the faster you move, the less you're inclusive, right? So people often have to balance those two things. Independence versus interdependence. How much is my organization willing to give up our individual goals to throw in with these other groups to do something together? That's another tension. Risk versus reward. That's kind of what Janita's question was getting at, right? Like, how much risk are we willing to take on? Oops. I see people writing, so I'll stop there. Okay. And one of the great things about dialectical questions is that they don't ask you to choose one or over the other. Because often when we ask questions, they presuppose that one side is right and one side is wrong. And these questions just ask you to explore the tensions. Oh, I had a slide about that. So you're not trying to resolve it to one side or the other. You're just trying to have a conversation about it. What does it mean for the work that you're doing together? So I have some examples. So this example talks about engagement versus disengagement. So this is a pretty typical question, you know, at a coalition meeting, especially a new one. How committed is your organization to the goals of this coalition? Right? Perfectly reasonable thing to want to know. But here's a better way to ask the question, because you're committing to that top question. What originally drew your organization to this coalition? And what's making it hard to show it fully right now? You can say like hard or easy, right? That's a broader question. Now we have something to talk about. Like, I don't have to declare anything. I could just kind of riff on it a little bit. This is what I'm seeing. And so the first question kind of almost explicitly, I was going to say tacitly, pushes towards engagement, right? Like, this is saying you need to be more engaged. And then the bottom question names both, right? The push and the pull of it, without saying that one or the other has to be the truth. Speed versus inclusion is a big one in the conservation and climate change, right? Space, because there's urgent things happening. This grant deadline is tomorrow. The city council is meeting next week. You know, the icebergs are melting, all the things that are happening like right this second. And so a common question is, what's preventing us from moving faster on the policy agenda? But if you want to reframe that, which treats speed as the goal, you know, another way to frame it is, where does this coalition feel like it's actually moving? Where are you moving things forward? And what's the thing we keep circling back to without resolving, right? So it's like it's an exploratory question that's not presupposing, you know, we now have to figure out how to get ourselves moving. You get to have an open discussion to surface the knowledge in the room. Do these types of questions feel familiar, or do folks have any questions about? Yeah.
I'm curious, is there any benefit in presenting the dialectical question as like a zero-sum game, figure response?
Good question. I don't think it's meant to be a triggering question. I mean, I wouldn't say, here's a dialectical question for you. I would just ask that as a question, right? And that's the idea. If you want to know the top thing, ask the bottom thing. That's the idea behind show and tell. I'm a very direct person. And so the art of taking my direct question in my mind to a more open discussion question in practice is something that I've worked really hard on. So this is what I've seen work in practice. So let's play a quick game of like, which question is dialectical? Because you're going to craft yours in just a moment. So we're going to, right? I did it, we're going to do it, and you're going to do it. So which is the dialectical question? This is like the softball question. What are the benefits of collaboration to your org? Is the number one option. Which part of the shared agenda feels urgent and alive for your team, and which feels like someone else's priority? So which is the dialectical question? You can just put up fingers, 1 or 2, right? Softball question. Good job. Everybody got it right. Does someone want to tell me why?
Number 2 has pieces that you can fill it. So you don't have to have a whole.
Yeah.
There's also 2 different groups of things. So something's alive and something's not alive.
make sure I can see any other hands. Okay. Yep, number 2. Which is a dialectical? What's holding this in place, and where do you see any small flicker of movement, this being like the work? And then number 2, what's blocking your progress, and how do we get things moving again? I see most people putting it number 1, but I also saw people getting to it more slowly. So before I show which one's right, what was challenging about these 2? What made everyone take a little bit longer to consider?
It's contention.
They both use the word and. I mean, and is a sort of signal word from the first couple, but that first one doesn't build and around an assumption. Whereas that second one assumes that the topography is on.
That's right. That's right. So you can throw and in a dialectical, you can throw and in any question, but it doesn't make a dialectical one. What makes one dialectical versus the other is exactly right. It's not presupposing we need to get things moving, right? It's just asking, where is there energy and where isn't there energy? Yeah, it's a value judgment. Exactly. So your activity now is to create a dialectical question. So here's what we're going to do. On the next slide, I'm going to present a question, just a regular question. And then I'm going to ask you to, as individuals, rewrite it as a dialectical question. So I'm going to, there's going to be tips that are going to come up on the screen. And I'm going to give you the tension that I want you to work through. I'm going to skinny it down. I made this exercise for this group really easy because the last time I did it, they were like, and then in trios, I want you to share your versions and compare and contrast the differences, right? Like you can workshop one another, so you can add something to yours. And then I want you to nominate one to share out. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to like workshop your own, and then you're going to have a few minutes to work in your groups, figure out, to share what you did. Sound good? Okay, here's the question. I want everyone to write it down on your phone or write it down on pad paper. Take a picture of it. We're all working on the same climate crisis. Why can't we just align on one shared strategy? Might feel a little familiar. And this is very obviously not a dialectical question. So here's the question and the tension to explore in your revised question. I want you to work through cooperation versus advocacy. So working together towards a shared goal versus pushing your org's distinct priorities. So you're going to revise that top question to kind of play with this tension. That is a common tension, right, in our work. And I'll flip back to the slide in a second. But to help you, I'm also going to share some typical frameworks for dialectical questions. Putting an and in there is one, but there are some others. How does A create positive outcome? And then how does it create a challenge? When does A serve you well? When does B? How do you balance A with B? In what ways has A contributed to an outcome? And what ways has B contributed to a different outcome? Now, there's the teacher in me. You cannot just plug and play with these frameworks. You will get a 0 and have to do extra credit. But I want this to help guide your thinking. So these are not going to stay up there. So yeah, you can think about them. I see people taking pictures. That's fine. Sometimes people do that. So take these for a minute, absorb them, and I'm going to flip back to this slide and ask you to work on your dialectical questions. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes too fast? I feel like, yeah. 3 minutes? 3.5 minutes? To rework the question into a dialectical question that explores that tension. So I'm going to put the time on my phone, so keep you honest. I'll give you 3 minutes and 15 seconds. In the interest of time, I'm going to kind of show the discussion questions just so we can kind of stay on time. So I'm going to say in trios, I'm going to ask folks to share your draft question, and then, provide feedback to one another and how you might further refine it. And then again, select one to share with the larger group. So bonus points if you want to form a new trio, but I totally understand if you want to stick with the trio that you had before. But it should be 3 to 4 people. And unfortunately, I'm gonna only give you 8 minutes. Okay. Happy collaborating. All right. I'd love to hear what folks came up with, and I'm sure your fellow attendees would as well. Okay. All right. Who wants to be the first?
Just say something.
Passing, rapid, volunteer.
Before we land it, what climate solutions have you noticed matter to your community, and what are ways they haven't worked out?
You heard a lot of No, it's kind of a good question. Yeah. Do you see people go, huh, right? I'm always looking for that. Great. Thank you. Who else would like to share?
What aspects of the climate crisis drive your organizational strategy, and which aspects live outside your scope?
That's good. Yeah. Who else?
This is a little similar. What are the various aspects of the crisis that are priorities for you, and when has collective action been there?
Okay. Yeah. Maybe 1 or 2 more?
How do our sustainability strategies misalign? What opportunities are there that are limited?
Okay. Maybe 1 more. Andrea, better than nominating you.
So we had, what examples do you have of a successful partnership with your organization in the past, and how best do you see our partnership emulating that concept?
See lots of nods, right? Which is a sign that like, huh, I can ponder and answer that question. That's great. Like ducks to water, you all were. So tell me, what was, how did this feel? How did changing your mindset to this type of questioning? Where is it challenging? And where did it come to be?
One of the challenges I saw is, did we call attention to differences?
Mm-hmm.
Do we name them and identify them? Because we kept using words like distinct priorities or competing priorities. We didn't know if that, like, does that signal to the room that there's already division or we have differences?
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to remove that language, or do we want to include that? And we recognize that it's there.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of the question? I think I have an answer.
Sure. So how do we balance competing organizational priorities with real progress on our areas of overlapping concern?
Oh, I see. So I would take away competing, because I think you want those things to emerge through the conversation. You don't want someone to presuppose where we compete, especially in organizations in the same region, because you're trying to break down assumptions and you want people to be present in the room. So I think the answer to your question is yes, take those things out. Yeah.
I think Zuri had a really amazing idea on that same topic, which is that if you're real time in the room and you're managing the energy and you're not managing, but facilitating the discussion in the room, being aware of that creates an opportunity. For example, we use misalign first and then align second. Let's name where we're misaligned and work towards alignment. And Zuri pointed out that if we feel the energy in the room is drifting apart, we can flip that and put align first and facilitate that productive conversation towards alignment. And then go into that more difficult part later.
Yeah.
Or if we're doing really well and we've got great energy in the room, let's name where we're not aligned.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that kind of gets to the thrust of the thing. My thought about that is the same as the thought about this gentleman's question, which is before you put a value on it, before you name something aligned or misaligned or competing, or you want to surface it first. So people in the room can then decide what's aligned or misaligned. So there's a question you ask before that question. The question is, okay, so now that we see where our priorities are, where are we aligned or misaligned? So that's, you kind of have to ask people for your organization, or my organization, your organization, say what our priorities are. Put them on a whiteboard, use Mentimeter, and then reflect on them and say, okay, where is their alignment and misalignment? Yes.
I found it really hard not to come in with like a preference for one or the other, right? To make sure that I'm assuming you want to cooperate. That seems to be my perspective, but also
maybe sometimes that we shouldn't be, and it'd be better to advocate separately, and so being able to ask the question without showing my preference to one or the other.
Yeah. That's the hard part. It's hard if you're in it to be objective. It's actually why facilitators have jobs, right? Because you need objectivity sometimes. But yeah, that's also true. Okay, last comment.
I don't, just as a way of facilitation, I often find, you craft the right question and then help people hear the question. Like, so I'm trying to get at what's the importance of writing the question or having someone read it back. Because I'll say a question and then they're answering
a little piece of it.
A little bit of it, or they're answering something that they already wanted to answer.
Yeah. So I will say that comes with experience. That's the only way to do it, right? Like to know the right altitude to ask the question, so to speak. It's why context matters. A lot of people kind of reference context. Like if I know the people in the room are this, or if I see the people in the room drifting or coming closer together, right? That's why at the top of the meeting, you open with questions that, if you're facilitating, give you a sense of who's in the room, right? Even look at your attendee list beforehand. Sometimes I have conversations with people beforehand. I used to talk to Zaya before we had these big meetings. What's going on? Are people getting along? What's happening? Right? And so like that would really help me figure out like what questions to ask in this space. So great. I'll push forward, but one final thought. When in doubt, ask the compare and contrast question. And I don't know how many people saw this interview. If you stopped watching political interviews, me too, but my dad still watches the news and I was there and I got roped into it. And political interviews tend to go the same way all the time. Like question, talking point, got your question, change the subject, right? That's just how it works. That typically is how this goes. So I was like listening with half an ear. But then Tommy almost asked a question of Trump that was actually kind of interesting. He was asking about the Republican ticket for the next presidential election. And he was talking about Marco Rubio, I think, and JD Vance. Who would you endorse? Oh, I don't know. Who would be at the top of the ticket? I can't really say. But then Tommy almost said, well, tell me how they're different. And Trump like paused. And I paused too. And I was like, well, that was a good question. And Trump went, well, that's the best question you've asked so far. And on a rare occasion, Trump and I agreed. And he had to pause and think. So if you want to Google the clip, he had to pause and think about, well, Marco Rubio is this, but JD Vance is this, but both of them have this, and it changed the whole tempo and tenor of the conversation. So I think when in doubt, compare and contrast. Okay, so the last tip is, with 15 minutes left, and this is something you would do at the end, to deepen connections, ask questions that get people invested in the process and the outcome. So first, you kind of open it up and get people knowing one another. Then you get people discussing the dialectical questions. And then as you kind of close, and it could be in one meeting, it can be over the course of 3 meetings, you want to get people invested in the process and outcome. Before I jump to that, one more thing about dialectical questions. Sometimes you don't have to ask one. Sometimes that can be the guiding question of a meeting, and you step through smaller individual questions to get to that answer. So I don't want you kind of going into every meeting with this huge question, right? Sometimes figuring out that dialectical question that's driving the work will help you come up with like the smaller iterative, like we're going to step through these questions to get to your endpoint. So I just wanted to offer that, because sometimes people aren't ready to think that big. Okay. But once they are, you want to get people invested in the process and the outcome. Just jump past that. David Brooks, the columnist, formerly of the New York Times, and then I think of the Washington Post, and I think now he's gone altogether. I might have that backwards. He wrote a great book called How to Know a Person, and he advises that you want to make people authors, not witnesses. And so we can position people as witnesses to decisions already made, or as authors to a story still being written. That quote. It's a great book. The latter empowers action and a belief that participation will have impact. So this could be to like, not just your coordinating committee who tends to meet more intensely, but to your broader coalition that might only meet quarterly. So here's a different way to think about these kinds of questions that get people invested, right? So a lot of coalitions or established networks come up with plans, right? This is what we're going to do over the next year, 3 years, 5 years. So you could ask people in the room, what do you think of this 5-year plan, right? what you want to know. Not a great question to ask because everyone's in a different place with it. Everyone has jobs. So, I mean, I think it's great. Yeah. Moving on. But think about this question. What's one way this new direction will change your work over the next 2 months? So now I'm thinking about the plan as it relates to my work. Now I can answer the question. Now I'm invested because either I'm really excited to do that or there's no possible way our organization can get engaged in that in the next 2 months. Another example is here in Ohio, there's a large steering committee for a big statewide coalition I was working with. And the head of the coalition was like, I want to have a meeting, but these are the questions I've asked in the past and they fell flat, right? Where have we made progress? Where should we adjust the plan and how? What should we do next? He's like, those questions just didn't work. And now you all are dialectical question experts, so you can probably figure out how we revise them. So instead of where have we made progress, where are you feeling energy and or excitement in the coalition's work? Oh, so now I'm just identifying places. Where should we adjust the plan and how? Where are you feeling energy, excitement, or urgency around your work that's like not in the plan, right? So not like how should we change the plan, but what's going on that's not in the plan right now, right? That's a much easier thing to identify. And then what should we do next? Are there areas important to add to the state plan in place of other priorities, right? Like based on the landscape, what should we add? What's missing? And these are questions that are much more exploratory, right? I'll show the Bloom's taxonomy at the end. Now I'm learning I should show it earlier. But these are all like identification questions, right? Low demand questions that generate high value responses. And that's really the trick of asking good strategic questions and getting people engaged. So this is my kind of closing salvo on that, because I want to give time for questions, but meetings often belong to the people in the room. So ask them questions that give them ownership in the room. So I was going to ask you to draft a question that makes a person feel ownership. We could do that at lunch and find one another and share them. But again, I want to leave time for questions. So, well, any questions about that section, about ownership and closing and those kind of processes? Mm-hmm.
So can you just dive into that for a brief second? Yeah. When you say ownership, I really got the David Brooks comment on making people authors.
Yeah.
The story that they're telling. Is that what you mean by ownership?
Yes.
Maybe more of a call to action.
It's more like a call to action. Or even in the plan, where do you see your organization particularly aligned to pick up some of this work? Or where's your organization have energy that's aligned with something already in the plan, right? So that shows me that I'm the one driving it, as opposed to the person in front of the room driving it, which typically is how people show up in spaces. Does that answer your question? I feel like kind of insufficient.
Have there been instances where like you're trying to give them ownership, but they maybe end up taking the conversation direction, or like meeting goes off and another goes off the rails, but you balance?
Yeah.
You know, sticking to like a goal that you have in mind while
yeah. Just like I ask people, where's the energy? I tend to follow the energy in the room. If I try and redirect back a couple times and there's resistance, then I name it and I ask, is this a thing that we need to discuss in place of another thing? Because you can't, if you want groups to work together and there's a roadblock there, you have to address the roadblock. But there's just, sometimes you can go around it, sometimes you can put it in a parking lot, but sometimes even if you just ask and acknowledge it and then ask the group, is it okay if we revisit this and this becomes the focus of our next gathering? Or is there something we need to talk about right now? So it's a matter of context and experience.
So I know some of us have to work internally, we're working on policy, that helps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, helps to save the group, whatever it is. And, there's always people that they don't want to change, they're, oppositional, right? That's not something they're looking forward to doing. So I love your question about what is one way this would change your work. Is there any other question similar to that you can figure out what those oppositional, because you need to know those things. So you'll find a solution. I don't know if you have any other questions that are like, for that like internal. Players do.
Would a question, you tell me if this resonates, would asking a similar question as, where are your interests? And like, just asking that question and surfacing them, and then looking at them and seeing where they're in conflict with one another. Like, you know, like, don't ask where are we in conflict, ask what the thing is, and then say there seems to be tensions here, right? How, like, where might we navigate these tensions in service of the goals we all have together? Good questions I found are like, start with where might we begin? Where are you experiencing this? If you want a good opening question, start with where. It's a good identification question. The how comes later. It's a great overall thinking. Okay, yep.
I wonder how you think about if you are not an external facilitator. So you are both facilitating communities, groups, but you also have a large stake in it, and you are also responsible for the work.
Yeah.
So I also have a contribution that I care about and put in that I want to contribute, and I also need to facilitate this information from the people I'm working with. Like, should I journal about these in advance to bring them, or should I work with them in real time?
Yeah. So my organization is small but mighty, but oftentimes you still have to meet. Yes, journal in advance, but create like a committee of the willing to help you plan your meetings, to help get beyond your own biases and your own expectations of the meeting. It's hard when you have something you need to get out of the meeting. It kind of stifles conversation because you're like, I don't care what you think, I need you to do the thing, right? But if you pull together people, it's great if you have like a person who's lateral to you, a person who's junior to you, and a person who's senior to you. Because in organizations, that's easier to stuff out. And to work together to plan a meeting that is centered around the topic that you're talking about. That's a great way to kind of navigate this class. You have time maybe for one other question? Then I'll give you your closing challenge.
If you're responsible for implementing a plan or deploying a process, it's about underlying achieving successfully.
Yeah.
Do you ever find value in the a common value judgment, like hitting a schedule, achieving certain outcomes, and like it's like the question if you're a third party facilitator versus it's your responsibility to make this happen. Do you modify this?
So yes and no. Say that one more time. Oh yes, I'm sorry. Can you turn around and ask?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not saying if you're not a third party facilitator, you're responsible for process for working with lot of tasks. I actually don't think it happening. So you're valuing raising it out, your question, looking at value judgment, go there. Before I can pursue, we all share a common goal. When asking an ownership question, like don't ask me about question the importance of this plan. This is what's happening.
This is within your organization?
Often I work with building design and construction. Facility decarbonization. Sometimes you work with facility operators who are getting like 10th engineer, that's fine. Or contractors or supplying this whole day.
Yeah. So I think clarity is helpful, but I think if it's an organization, you can tell, right? Command and control. Like you can ask, but people are voluntold. People are voluntold to be at this collaborations I were part of. But if you want people to go far with you, you got to take your time. I don't know how else to say it. There's no other way around it because people will, I don't have to do it. You pushing me, I'm not going to do it. Right. So building relationships outside of your meetings is a way around that. I used to make a lot of individual phone calls to people when there was strife in one of the coalitions and people were dropping off and calling people's bosses to complain about things that happened in the meeting. It was a mess. There was a lot of like, girl, what's wrong? Like, what's going on? Right. And like, what's going on over here? And it kept the group together. That's it. That's the only way. Okay. I think we have like 3 minutes left. We did our recap. So just the 3 tips, right, that we covered today. Open well with questions focused on context and connection. I'll add in the individual here. To lead rich discussions, ask questions that spark stories and deep thinking, not declarations. And then to deepen connections and commitment, ask questions that get people invested in the process and outcome. So what comes next if you want to continue your learning? These are some of the books that I used and I've read to prepare and kind of help with my work. That book, Community Peter Block, is particularly funny because I referenced it out of David Brooks's book, and I was like, oh, that sounds like a great book. Let me go and buy that book. And I looked at my bookshelf, and I had that book. And I was like, oh, I wish I had read that book. I think I got it in grad school. And then I opened it, and I had read that book. And I was like, but grad school was a long time ago, so you can forgive me for forgetting. But I was like, maybe that's why I do a good job. But so it's here for UNC MPA. They're looking for a Master's in Public Administration program, go Heels. And I kept referencing Bloom's taxonomy. And so I just want to show what that looks like. This is the influence of my mother, who my whole life has referenced this. She's an educator. If you're wondering where to start, start at the bottom. If you want to make questions easy to answer, start at remember. That's tell me about a time, right? Like when did you realize? All you have to do is recall. Low demand. Asking people to create, which is at the top. What can we do together? That's hard, right? Because you're creating something out of like whole cloth. And so in your questions, in a meeting, in your dialectical questions, even if your dialectical question is your North Star and you have to craft 3 meetings and 10 questions over those 3 meetings to get there, travel your questions from bottom to top of Bloom's taxonomy. If you're ever lost, Google it. And then also be observant. I collect questions from everywhere. Like I go to a church that instead of turn and talk to your neighbor, they put 2 questions up every Sunday, and then you really have to talk and discuss the questions. When I saw that, I was like, I'm gonna go to church here. This church is the same as me. NPR has a great, I think it's called like 3 questions. And I found a list of the questions online. Someone kind of copied them all. So I think it was a Reddit thread. You can find questions there. I TV interviews. I pick up questions everywhere. And so just kind of be observant. And then here is my challenge to you as we close out. You have to put principles into practice. My mother makes fun of me when I went to grad school. I lived in New York City, so I never cooked. And I was like, I'm going to the South. I'm going to learn to cook. So I watched the Food Network all summer. And I was like, I'm learning to cook. And my mom's like, you could make dinner. And I was like, no. Just going to watch the Food Network. Similarly, good for you for coming in here and learning about these principles, but you have to put them into practice. So my challenge to you is to get in the kitchen and start cooking. So in the next 2 weeks, find opportunities to apply these lessons in your work or in your life. That's my closing kind of homily to you. So we did questions. So I'll just say thank you. If you have any questions, joy@icl.org. Super easy to find me. And yeah, thank you for being such a great group.